Okay, we're going live in 3 seconds. Okay, I see a lot of attendees already. Um, so welcome back, everyone. So now it's time for our second workshop of Career Fair. Um, the word networking has very unpleasant implications for many these days. Everyone says that it's important, but no one tells it how to do it. Well, we have a solution. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Joanne Kamens again on the panel, um, who will enlighten us on this topic today. She's the executive director of Addgene, and she has worked in multiple pharma and biotech companies before, and also actively interested in advising scientists for their careers. In this workshop, she will introduce the idea of how strong relationships are necessary for most people to succeed in their careers. It will provide practical tools for meeting people and for nurturing new and established connections. So, with this, let's all welcome Dr. Kamens on the virtual stage, and the stage is all yours.
Thanks, Dwajit. Okay, so this is only going to be a workshop if you guys make it interactive. So we have plenty of time. Unlike my last talk, I'm not going to be rushed here. So what I would like to see is if you have questions, I'd like to try and answer them in real time. So please, I'm keeping an eye on the question and answer panel. Please get your questions up there, and I'm happy to interrupt the talk and answer questions as we go along. It might be more pertinent to everyone anyway. I'll do a couple polls just for interest, but for the most part, this can't be as interactive as it usually is, obviously, because I usually do it in person. But we'll see how it goes. And I'm happy to, as I said, please interrupt with questions as we go along. So the reason why I call this program not Networking 101 is because I think when you think of networking, you think of meeting strangers and exchanging business cards with them and then never talking to them again, or trying to meet someone who's important, who might, for some unexplained reason, help a stranger like you. That's not what I'm talking about here. And so this seminar is really how to start early in your career and always be building relationships that will be beneficial later. And it's more a mindset than an actual single activity that you do. It's a mindset to really being open to relationships and strengthening them. Okay, so Emanuela, thanks for your question. I'm going to get to informational interviews a little later in the presentation, and if I forget to answer your question then, please remind me. Okay, so what is networking? Again, it's not just meeting strangers, it's really developing relationships with the people around you to eventually have opportunities or provide them with help. Because networking is not about getting stuff. A lot of it is actually about giving stuff. And it can happen both private life, professional life, and it really is the key access to having opportunities and the help that you need. You cannot know everything yourself. It is having a lot of people who know a lot of stuff in your network that's going to help you learn the things you need to learn when you need to. So why is it important? Well, it's important for academia. It's important for non-academia. It's important for everything that you do. It's the jumping off point for collaborations. It's where you find mentors. Everybody tells me, how do I find a mentor? This is how. It's a support system. Someone asked, how do I overcome my imposter syndrome in the last seminar? It's by having people around you who know you, who can tell you and make you feel confident about what you're capable of. And so we all really need this kind of support and education and network. And it just makes working more fun and more satisfying when we can also pay it forward and do our own favors and support for the people around us. So it is what it is about, and it is one of the most important skills that you will develop during your training is to do this regularly and naturally. So I mentioned in my last seminar that it's not just for jobs, for sure. Building relationships is helpful for science. It's helpful for everything. It's helpful for personal questions, but it is a way that people get jobs. And a huge number of people get their jobs through networking because of what I mentioned before. And I'm going to repeat it again in case there are people at this workshop who weren't at my last talk. It's just really, really important because people hire people they know way more often than they hire people they don't know. And so you have a huge advantage if you're applying for positions through referrals. So, how do people get jobs? Knowing people. That big red pie is referrals. That means like you're recommended by someone that person knows and trusts. So, I know Joanne, as I said before, she talks a lot, but she's good at the bench and she's very good at managing people. She's definitely worth interviewing. Direct contact means someone that you know actually hires you. This happens in science all the time because it's so much easier to build a company if you trust and know the people that you're hiring. You're going to want to hire the people that are your patriots that you already know. And in science, because when you finish your training, you're actually fairly advanced in the workforce. Like you're not right out of college. You're anywhere from 6 to 12 years out of college. Recruiters can play a role in finding positions. And recruiting is basically just networking. It's just they connect you to people that they know. They're just like the master networkers. Okay, so there's a good question here. How to find out what one can offer to someone during networking. I'm going to come back to that also and remind me again if I forget to answer. So, how do relationships get you a job? People trust referrals. They trust knowing that they know someone longer than the one day it takes to interview. So, while 7% of applications may come from referrals, 40% of hires come from referrals. It's probably even higher than that because people don't even always claim it's a referral. So, why is this? People can be pleasant and normal and seem nice for a day. And when you interview, you often only get to meet them for a day or an hour, or maybe just a phone call these days, a remote interview or video call. So then, you hire them and they're literally impossible to work with. And so the people that would know about someone's personality, their pleasantness, their demeanor is someone who's known them for a long time. So if you work with someone who's known someone for a long time and they refer them to you, or someone that you trust says, "Oh, I've known Joanne for years. These are her flaws, but here's what she's great at," you really feel like that resume is going to go to the top of the pile, right? And so it's super important to know that you have a much better chance of getting in the door to interview if you are referred by someone. And employers actually talk about how they prefer referrals because it's cheaper, it's easier, it's better fit, which is a little bit of a dangerous word because then you get into bias. But it is a good way to find people that you're interested in. And something like 25% of jobs go to people who actually knew the hiring manager. So maybe the job was never advertised or no other people were even given an opportunity. Someone is just hired by someone they know because they already trust them and they know that they can do at least part of the job that's being advertised. So I showed the same slide in my last presentation. How did I get here? I'll flesh out these transitions a little more. So my advisor was involved in the early days of biotech. And he knew a lot of people in the early days. The Genetics Institute was the first East Coast U.S. biotech company, Genentech on the West Coast here in the United States. And he was on the science advisory board for Genetics Institute. He knew a lot of people who were starting up new biotechnology companies. And when I was getting ready to graduate, I said, look, I think I want to go straight to pharma. I don't understand this angst about doing postdocs. I didn't do a postdoc. I didn't have to. I already knew how to do science. I basically did a postdoc in industry, which was more useful anyway. I went straight to, and I also needed money. I didn't have enough money to pay for daycare, and I had a baby. My husband was still a graduate student. So I said, I think I want to go straight into bench research and pharma. That's what I'm interested in right now. And he said, okay, I'll introduce you to some people. Now, remember, there's no internet in those days. So jobs were actually advertised in the newspaper. There was a whole section of the newspaper that it was how you looked for jobs. And the only way was through people or the newspaper. So he introduced me to 3 different people. I had 2 interviews or 2.5 interviews. And then I got an offer from a company called BASF, which was later acquired by Abbott, which is now AbbVie. And I took the job and worked there for 15 years. So, I had to write a resume, but I only sent it to 3 places and it was all through referrals. In fact, I interviewed for that job a month postpartum and had to ask them to give me 2 half days so that I could nurse the baby in the middle of the day. So I was pretty demanding, even on the job hunt, for what I was looking for, a place that would be flexible with that type of thing. So I was at Abbott for 15 years, knew a lot of people, had done a lot of networking through Association for Women in Science, through Healthcare Business Women's Association, through some other diversity volunteer work. I had stayed in touch with ex-colleagues. I had scientific collaborations. It was one of those scientific collaborators who actually ended up offering me a job. He had left town and then come back to Boston to start a biotech with Craig Mello, the Nobel Prize winner for RNAi. They were starting an RNAi startup with Craig Mello, and we were having lunch and just to reconnect after many years of him being working in the Denver area, and he said, "Hey, we're looking for a research director for this new startup." And he told me about his new project, and he said, you know a lot about RNAi. You've managed a big group of people. Are you interested?" And I was interested for a variety of reasons. It was a good time for me to leave Abbott. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, let's get you interviewing. And I actually gave notice 2 weeks later. Ironically, those two companies were next door to one another, so I had to sneak around a little bit to do that interviewing. Got to interview with Greg Mello, got to see his Nobel Prize. And then I started working at RXI 2 years after that. Fantastic, loved biotech, fast-paced, super fun, learned so many things, loved it. So that was that. Never, no job ads, never wrote a resume, didn't even have a resume, basically. Just interviewed straight away for that position. With Addgene, I was laid off from my biotech job. If people are interested, I can tell you that story later. And I was looking for work. I put up on my LinkedIn that I was looking for work. And then a number of people saw on LinkedIn that I was unemployed, and they said, hey, we heard about this job at Addgene. It's not advertised, but it sounds great for you. You need to know a lot about plasmids and molecular biology and people management. And it was a really, really good match. So why did people recommend that to me? Because they knew me. They knew my skills. They knew my history. They knew my strengths. And they read the description and they saw me. This is why strangers can't really help you get jobs, why connecting with strangers is not useful, because they don't know you. They're not going to look at the resume and the job and say, oh, I know Joanne is looking for work. They're not going to do that. So that's why being in touch with people is important. There's a couple questions, all of which I'm going to hit in this talk. And if I don't hit them, please remind me. Every single one of these questions we're going to get to. So if I don't get to it, I'm going to review at the end and make sure that we do. So stay tuned. Okay. So you can't wait until you need the network to build it. And Paressa has a pertinent question for now. How can you build connections with industry when you've been spending most of your time in academia? Great question. So most cities have a biotech organization. In Massachusetts, it's called MassBio. I know a lot of cities in Europe have these organizations. Getting involved in the Horizons Career Fair organization, you're going to meet other people. Alumni from your lab is a good place to reach out to connections outside of academia. I don't say industry because industry implies pharma. There's like a million different jobs you can do. So I really think that reaching out to people who are doing science communication, science writing, medical liaison, tech transfer, there's just a million different jobs. And having informational interviews, which we're going to talk about, building relationships with those people is going to start to build your connections. Also, being on committees and volunteering with people who are doing other things is another good way to meet people. It's excellent to be outwardly looking and developing those relationships while you're training, because one of my take-home messages of networking, and if you remember one thing, remember that you can't wait to build your network till later. So anytime that you're out doing something aside from pipetting all alone by yourself in the lab, you're meeting people. Also, the people around you in your graduate program, the more senior ones, may be going to industry jobs in the future or non-academic positions. Getting to know them before they leave is a great way to start developing the future network. You don't have to reach out to people who are strangers who you have no reason to reach out to. That's just uncomfortable. But being connected to the people around you in your department, that's pretty easy, actually. I don't think strategically about networking. I don't be like, ooh, that's a good person to know. I just meet people. I meet people that I enjoy speaking to. I meet people that are good at networking and connecting themselves so that they like to talk about their networks. And I help people. I do stuff for people. And we'll talk a little bit about what you have to offer. Everybody has something to offer. So, you really want to be, as I mentioned, instead of doing things uncomfortably with strangers, become active in groups. The more often you go to the same networking group, the more you'll get to know the people and it becomes less uncomfortable. So if an industry or pharma associated organization or another club or something that you go to, if you go regularly, if you go often, you're going to get to know the people. And those people are going to actually be, eventually will become friends, will become, potentially colleagues. I can't tell you how many ex-friends have become people I've worked with in different ways through my career. And so that's really what you want to do, is not like go to some random event, because then you'll never know people. It's always going to be strangers. Um, and reaching out to people that you are already in your network is also a good thing. So if you have an informational interview with someone, saying, who else do you think I should meet? Who would it be good for me to talk to? That's one of the best things you can do as a networker. And someone asked, what do you have to contribute? Connecting people. If you know two people who should know each other and you connect them, you have done a huge favor to those people. If you read a paper that is of interest to someone and you send it to them, there's so much literature to read. That is a favor you can do for people. Sharing your knowledge. You have knowledge. Training someone, mentoring someone. These are all favors that you can do for people. Let's see, give one example of this. Some years ago, somebody's friend, their daughter needed to interview a scientist for homework, and so I volunteered to do that interview. I gave her a half an hour of my time. She wrote a paper. I edited it with her. It was really fun. I like to teach. Scientists like to teach, so I had a nice time. Like 8 years later, I went on LinkedIn and posted that my daughter was coming back from a year overseas and was looking for a summer job out of high school. And this is what she can do. She can type really fast. She's really good with these computer programs. Does anybody have a paying or even unpaying job for her? And I got a few leads. I have good connections, but things weren't working out. And then she called me at work and she said, I just got a job offer from the Harvard Tech Transfer Office. I was like, did you interview with them? She's like, no. How do they even know who I am? And I said, oh, I think I know. So the mother of that child that I had helped was now the head of the Harvard Tech Transfer Office some 8 years, 10 years later. And when she saw that my daughter needed help, I had done something for her daughter. She's like, oh, we've got some work to do around the office. Let's just hire that girl. And they did. And she worked there for 2 summers, actually. Was a big help to them, and a big help to have them on her resume because she stayed in the healthcare field. So now she's all grown up and working. So you never really know. And it took me a while actually to figure out how that connection had happened, but that is how it had happened. So, when you're doing things for people, you're sort of paying it forward. You're not looking for a return, but you never really know where that return is going to come from. Also, networking is a thing that sometimes it's hard to get in the habit of meeting people. So I actually, early in my career, I found I was pretty exhausted. I had 2 kids at home, but I had this sense that there were hundreds of people at Abbott and BASF that were doing interesting things, and I wanted to learn about what they were doing. So I made myself a rule that I would not just take a nap at my desk during lunch like I wanted to. Twice a week, I would go to the lunchroom and have lunch with another human being. And later on, I extended that to having lunch with one person at the company and one person somewhere else, either a phone call or lunch with someone in person at another organization. And I had that as like a to-do list. And if Friday came and I hadn't done my lunches, it would be on me to reach out and arrange them and make sure that every week I met with 2 people other than my direct coworkers. And that to-do list, scientists are very good at to-do lists, really helped motivate me as an action item. To get, to build relationships and maintain them, not just meeting new people, but staying in touch with people that I knew. Okay, so asking for help. So it's really good to ask for help because people can help you if they know what you need. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the psychology of asking for help. People actually do want to help. So you can connect people, as I mentioned. You can ask for leads and names, and you can get connections. You have to be careful about getting over dependent because that scares people a little bit. Everybody's busy. There's only a limit to how much someone who doesn't know you that well can help you. But saying that, well, I'm trying to get a job is not really a good way to ask for help because that's a huge ask. But saying to someone, I'm interested in jobs in small biotech in this area. Do you know anyone in small biotech that I could talk to for half an hour that you would be willing to introduce me to? A very specific and simple ask are the best kinds of asks that can be fulfilled. So you can't ask someone, and again, I'm not going to talk about mentoring today, but you don't ask someone to be your mentor because that sounds like a pretty heavy responsibility. They may become your mentor, but you ask someone for coffee. Can I take you to coffee? Can we have a half an hour Zoom chat? I really would like to ask you a few questions about what the work that you're doing, right? And that could eventually turn into a mentorship relationship. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But having a very discreet, time-bound ask is a really good way to get help from people. Also, not everyone will help. A lot of people will, and what you're looking for are the yes people. Some people will say no. Don't worry about those people. Just move on to the yes people. So, why is it safe to ask for help? It's safe to ask for help because of a psychological phenomena known as cognitive dissonance. And I don't know how this translates into other languages, so I'm going to explain. When we have assumptions in our brains as human beings that don't agree with something that we're doing, we relieve that tension, and that tension is called cognitive dissonance. So Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the United States, was actually not such a nice guy. And when he was serving on the Pennsylvania state legislature, he had made some enemies. He's a very brilliant man, but just not, he was a little bit grumpy and a little bit hard to get along with. So he noticed that when his colleagues didn't like him so much, he had this tactic, and he wrote about this in his autobiography, of asking for a favor. And the favor he would ask is he would ask them to borrow a book, which was a much bigger deal back then in the 18th century than it is now. It's like maybe borrowing someone's laptop would be more comparable. And he would borrow the book, he would read it, and he would return it and thank them profusely for the favor that they had served him. And he discovered that when people did favors for him, they liked him better. It's not that he did something for them, they did the favor. So, what's that about? If I don't like you, why would I do a favor for you? That's cognitive dissonance. But once someone has done a favor for you, they actually kind of think that they like you a little bit. And this actually builds on itself. So, this is a great tactic if you're not getting along with someone in the lab. Ask them for like wine and food advice for like a month, every week or so. Take their advice, thank them profusely. They will start to like you better after this process. It's kind of creepy, but it actually does work a lot of the time. So we're not trying to trick people, but the fact is we have an inherent desire to help people. It makes us feel good, and it builds relationship. So whether we like it or not, very little things build relationship. In the old days before COVID, exchanging business cards built relationship. Doing small favors builds relationship, right? So that's why if you want to ask for informational interviews, you should be bold about it. So there was a question on the thing, how do you approach someone? So I have a blog on this topic with more detail, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it today because it is a key relationship building tactic for early career scientists. So how do you approach someone? So what is an informational interview first? Then we'll talk about the how. So this is a non-threatening conversation, which means you are not asking for a job. You are not directly going to the person to ask for anything specific except to get to know them and to learn about their choices and their career path. People love to talk about themselves. So this is an excellent non-threatening way to build relationship. And they, of course, are doing a favor for you by giving you their time, which means you are building a relationship. It's not a request for a job. Please do not pretend it's not a request for a job. I cannot tell you the number of people that try to connect with me on LinkedIn who tell me they admire my work or they're interested in diversity. And then their next message is about, oh, I noticed you have an opening at Addgene. I'm applying for that. Can you help me? I really hate that. Everybody hates that. It's manipulative. If you are networking and asking for a job, tell the person first up, I'm interested in a job at your organization. Could you help me connect to the hiring manager? Do not be sneaky about this. It comes off extremely unprofessional. I don't know how many times I have to say this. It happens to me literally weekly. Someone tries this tactic with me. It is extremely frustrating. So an informational interview is not that. It's just really meeting someone with no other agenda except understanding more about them and hearing how they did their career or about how they do skills that you know they're good at. So how do you approach someone? Well, I wouldn't suggest that you do this on LinkedIn with strangers. no one really wants to connect with a total stranger. And especially if you ask them things like, hey, can you tell me about research? You're so good at research, when that isn't what they're doing. So you want to really tailor your request specifically to the skills that you know that the person has, or that you believe they have, or the experience. It's best to get referred. So the best way to get an informational interview is to say to someone you know, do you know anyone you can introduce me to that I should talk to learn about their career path? And can you refer me and introduce me to them? People are something like 10 times more likely to say yes if you are introduced through a referral. So the best way to approach someone is to be referred. There are other tricks you can use on LinkedIn if you want to connect with someone. One is, and we're going to talk a little bit more about LinkedIn later in the talk. One is to go to alumni of your lab or your organization. So people love to work with their alumni. Go University of Pennsylvania Quakers. I'm just slightly more likely to accept a stranger invitation or a request for an informational interview from someone who went to University of Pennsylvania or was in my department at Harvard where I did my grad work. So you have alumni databases. You may be able to use Google to find people who used to be in your lab or your department. Reach out to those people if they're doing interesting things. They will often say yes. And anyone that you've met even for a short amount of time at an event or at a talk, and that you've introduced yourself to, if you've exchanged business cards with them, you can contact that person. They may or may not say yes, but it is acceptable. Someone that you have met, it is always acceptable to contact them and say, hey, we met at, a month ago at this thing. I would really like to hear more about your career, about your decisions, about the skill you have. Would you be willing to talk with me for 20 minutes? These days, it might be not coffee, it might be over video, but still, it's a good start when we can't get together in person. I would always offer to take someone for coffee if I could, but some people, now you can network with people who are halfway across the country, halfway across the world, and still network with them because we're all used to video. So I would look for those video opportunities to do that. I hope that answers your question about how to approach someone for an informational interview. I think that was Emanuela. So, okay, we already answered that one. Great. Okay, so how do you prepare? So the first thing to do is don't contact someone for an informational interview and then ask them about someone else's career path. Look at what they've done. You can go online, you can go on LinkedIn, and really prepare questions that are specific for them. There's nothing more frustrating for me than someone who asks me for an informational interview and then they don't know what they want to ask. The onus is on you to figure out what it is that you want to ask. So I would definitely prepare some questions in advance, and not questions like, could you tell me more about yourself? But like questions like, you've been asking me here very specifically, Joanne, I see that you've spoken about diversity in a lot of places. What is your current thinking about the best ways to make the workplace more diverse? Something very specific that's in my wheelhouse. That's the best way to start the conversation. And so those are some of the ways to get started with informational interviews. I have a little bit more about this on the blog. There's a blog called What is an Informational Interview? And you can read more about that there. So let's say you have this informational interview. What are you practicing? So at this point in the, hang on, okay. Oh, I see. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to, got it. Okay. Great. So what are you practicing? So at this point in the workshop, we usually in person would divide into groups and talk to strangers. Informational interviewing and networking is all about talking to strangers. If you are extroverted, this is probably a little more comfortable. If you consider yourself introverted or more shy, I wouldn't suggest that you try and go to big events. I would suggest that you focus on those one-on-one conversations with people, because introverted people like to talk about science and they like to talk to people as well. So find the way that talking to strangers works for you. Informational interviews is a great way to practice talking to strangers. So what are you practicing? You're practicing being attentive, listening well. Someone once described this to me as not listening to, but listening for the openings in the conversation where you can learn something, and really talking to strangers, which means being interested for real in what they have to say, being interesting yourself, which means sharing some personal information. So when we talk about science, when we network and build relationships, it can't just be about work. it has to be about a personal story as well, right? So you want to talk a little bit to make yourself a person as they should as well. What is your life like? How are you feeling today? And really mean it. Like, when a good networker enters a situation ready to share a story, like, I'll tell you a personal story. My daughter got engaged Saturday night. I can't really think about much else. I spent the last 2 nights up worrying about how we're going to do a wedding in the time of coronavirus. So you may not remember anything about me, but you're probably going to remember that I told you that story about my daughter getting married. People remember human stories. So preparing stories in advance is a great way to prepare for networking and an informational interview. I've given this advice to people and they never regret it. Things happen in your life that you will forget. I was at a networking event some time ago and I'm talking to this guy and he looked at me and he said, I think we wrote a paper together once. And I was like, no, really? He's like, oh, yeah. Like, it's been like 20 years, but I'm pretty sure we're on a paper together. And there we are on our phones looking up ResearchGate. And sure enough, we co-authored a paper. We didn't work directly with the first author. We worked with the first author, not with each other, but we co-authored a paper like 20 years ago. So at the time I knew his name, but of course you can't always remember every name for 20 years, but you're going to forget stuff. So it's really good to sort of keep a running list of stories that are interesting about your work that you can use in interviews, things that you succeeded at, things that you learned. It allows you to prepare the story so it makes you sound good and that you learned something, even if it's a story about a mistake. So when you get to an interview and someone says, what was your biggest challenge in da-da-da-da, you have that challenge and you have the way that you solved it. Interviewing is a little unnerving. So in interviews, you tend to forget those stories when you need them. So keeping a list of these through your career is a great thing. And it's also great when you're working for like doing professional reviews at the end of the year. What did you accomplish this year? So I really recommend that you keep a document and you just add to the top and a date and write in the stories in paragraphs and a half a page. Start by writing 10 great stories that you could use in an interview. It's a great way to prepare for all of this type of talking to strangers. So that's what you're practicing in an informational interview, and that's what networking really is. And what are things that you don't want to do if you're networking? So here's a few don'ts is don't look over your shoulder like someone more interesting is over there. When you talk to people, engage directly with them. I've been at conferences where it's clear that people are looking for someone more interesting and like, who wants to talk to those person? You don't have to talk to those people. If they're not interested in you, you don't have to be interested in them. I am not a Luddite. I am a level 40 Pokemon Go player, probably have the most Pokemon of anyone in my company. I love my phone. I have it with me all the time. But when you are talking to human beings, put your phone away, turn it off. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is to draw your attention away from another person to look at your screen. Turn it off. If you can't not ignore it, turn off the buzzing, put on do not disturb, put that thing away when you are talking to people. It is a huge mistake in relationship building to think that taking a moment for your phone. The only exception is if you are waiting for an emergency call from someone in the hospital and you tell the person that that is why you are looking at your phone. Even then, it's going to ruin your conversation. So put that phone away. I have other thoughts about phones, although being very attached to mine, that if you want, we can talk about that more later. Okay. So I already talked a little bit about preparing. We're going to talk about staying connected. We talked a little bit already about building connections with industry. It's about meeting those people and letting them lead you to other people. How can one offer? Okay, hold on. I'm going to delete. I'm just deleting the ones we did so I don't lose track. Okay, great. Oh, Emmanuel, thank you for posting the blog. It's in the chat. What is an informational interview? Okay. Okay, we're going to get Ilvika. We're going to come back to staying connected in a second. So I'm going to get to that one next. So let's talk about events. Someday we will have events again. I believe we will be networking in person. Relationship is much easier to build when you meet a person in person. So we can recreate some of these things online, and I urge you to do that during this time. But events are good. They may not be good if you're super introverted, but the great thing about events is that you are going to meet unexpected people. And those can sometimes be the most interesting people in your network. So going to an event is the same thing as setting up for an informational interview. Prepare, see who's going to be there, what's the topic of the speaker, have something to talk about. Conversation is a practiced art. Put your phone away. Talking to strangers and asking questions is not like, hey, how are you? Good, how are you? Fine. Then it's done. Then your conversation is done. You have to have something to say, right? So even if it's to offer some personal information, like I'm not feeling so great today, something bad happened in the lab, I messed something up, and tell your story, because the person's going to understand and connect with you much more if you talk about that story that you have for the day. So be open and be interested in what other people have to say. One of my favorite networking tricks is when I meet someone very different from me, to see how long it takes us to find something in common. And it's usually very fast. Like we both find out that we are started composting at home and it is driving our spouses crazy, or that we both drive the same kind of car that doesn't get the gas mileage it was supposed to, or we both have a really fantastic mother-in-law. Whatever it is, look for those commonalities, which can be really interesting, even from someone who's culturally, country, language, racially totally different. People are people, and this is the core also of breaking down biases. So figure out how it is that you can make sure you're interested in people. That's what makes events important. So at the event, you have to find a little energy. It is tiring talking to strangers. What's a favor you can do? Talk to someone who's standing by themselves. Anybody who is standing alone at a networking event is going to welcome someone coming over to them and saying, hi, I'm Joanne. What brings you to this event? Talk one-on-one. If the conversation is going well, you do not have to move on. This is not a volume contest. You are not trying to meet more people. You are trying to meet a person that is interesting for today. And if you meet that one person, that has been a total success. This happened to me once at Addgene has won these Best Place to Work awards, and every year you have to go to this big event. And the event one year was in this giant like disco, and so at the disco, it was so loud and noisy, and it was a little bit loud for my 56-year-old ears. And they were serving like this weird alcoholic kombucha drink, which looked very unappetizing to me. I'm sorry if you like kombucha, but it's not my thing. So I'm looking around and I see and I have to go to this event to get the award, and we're excited about the award. It's lovely, but okay. So I go over I find this little bar in the corner, and there's a guy there who's got seltzer, like soda water and lemon. And I'm like, oh, can I have that? Because I really don't want the kombucha. And I go to find like a quiet corner, and all of a sudden this woman taps me on the shoulder, about my age, and she says, where did you get that seltzer? I said, oh, that guy over there. She goes, I'm going to get one. Don't move. I'm coming back. So the two of us were hiding in this quiet corner, and she comes back to thank me for the advice about the soda. And we started talking, and it turns out she was like the COO of a tech company, which is very unusual for women my age, that invented this program Guitar Hero. If you know that, you'll know what that means. But I was fascinated in how she got to her role as a woman. And we started talking. We spent the next hour trying to kind of talk in the corner over the noise until the event was over. A hugely successful evening on my account. We ended up connecting on LinkedIn. We actually had a follow-up conversation. And so, that was just a fantastic way to get to know somebody. I didn't try and find other people. Once I had someone interesting to talk to, it was great, So if you meet one person, it's quality, not quantity. So my homework to you is think about what events you can attend in the coming weeks. Presumably those will be online perhaps, or maybe there are distance events opening near you. Go with someone that you know, because that really helps. You can help each other. Don't just talk to each other, but you can bring each other into your conversations, and meet one person that you want to follow up with. That's all that you need. Okay, a couple questions. Can you sometimes overshare in a new situation? I'm pretty open, so I guess I would say stay away from complainy things right away. You don't want to start in with some really heavy, sad information. I don't know, maybe personal health issues is not a place to start with. But I really think that being open with people is better, and they're going to be more sympathetic, and it's going to be more interesting. I'm probably an oversharer a little bit. But I don't think you have to prevent it. I think being genuine and honest about what's on your mind maybe stick to positive things in a first conversation is good. But be who you are. I think be yourself is really the answer. You want to network with people you like. If they don't like you, go network with someone else. You find if you overshare, you may get more of a positive return than if you undershare. I don't know if that's a good way to say it, but I think so. Um, okay, what could be a nice icebreaker? So I definitely think that you should think about this in advance. I've already given you a few examples today. My daughter got engaged. What great news. We can talk about weddings. I actually hate weddings. I have wedding post-traumatic stress syndrome. Not to I'm not making fun. I actually I'm slightly traumatized. My wedding was really stressful. I've been involved in other wedding planning, so I don't really like big weddings. Fortunately, my daughter doesn't want a big wedding, and we can't have a big wedding here in COVID-19 pandemic anyway. So this is going to be a lot less stressful for me than other situations. Icebreaker. A lot of people have experienced weddings that they've hated. You can now talk about weddings all you want. So easy icebreaker. You can talk about your science if the person is in your same field, but if you're in totally different fields, that might be a little hard. I just think there's a million icebreakers. Just go genuine. What are you thinking about today? What did you have for coffee? What was a high point of your day today? I had really good iced coffee this morning. I'm very happy about it. We could just start with coffee. Finding commonalities with people is pretty easy if you are open. I would say be open. Um, okay. How would you draw the line between professional connections and personal friendships? I have to be honest, I don't. I think professional connections become friendships, and friendships become professional connections. I've hired professional personal friends. I've become very close friends with professional connections. They're all in your network, and I don't think honestly that there's a line. I mean, you obviously don't want to have a partner or spouse or romantic partner reporting into you in your line. So this doesn't apply to issues of harassment or romance, but just colleagues and friends. I don't really think there's a line. So that's just me. But okay. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, following up. So one of the questions is, how do you nurture newly made connections? How can you follow up? So we're going to do that. And how can you stay connected with people? So this is the relationship building part. Remember I mentioned before that going to the same types of volunteer or networking events will allow you to keep meeting the same person over and over. You'll get to know them better, and then you may do a little bit of work together or give each other a bit of advice. That relationship will grow naturally. That's why it's good to do that way. If you meet someone that you want to follow up with, maybe you have their business card, maybe you contact them some other way, virtual life, you have their email, whatever. Link in with them. Don't send an anonymous LinkedIn invitation. We're going to talk about LinkedIn in a minute. Send them a note and say, hey, it was nice meeting you at that event. I'd like to connect with you on LinkedIn. And by the way, I thought of one other question for you. Asking people questions, great way to build relationship. Maybe you want to introduce them to someone else. Hey, I understand that you're doing a project on STEM education in your town for girls who are from financially disadvantaged homes. I know someone else who does that sort of work, who has a great education program. Can I connect you and introduce you to them? I think you would really get along and learn a lot from each other. Little favors like that, really easy to do. Take 5 minutes making a connection, and it very much appreciated and builds relationship. If someone does you a favor, you can send them an actual snail mail thank you note. You can send them an email note. I once got 6 perfect chocolate covered strawberries in a box delivered to me from someone that I helped get an interview. If someone really goes the extra mile, you can be dramatic as well. The woman that gave my daughter the job, I sent a giant gift chocolate box to her office to thank them for employing my daughter for the summer. Buy them coffee, and then you can build a relationship more because you're going to get to see them, right? So any ways that you can offer help without asking for stuff, those are excellent builders. But remember, people like to help, so you can ask for favors as well. I like to follow my connections and their companies on LinkedIn so that if something good happens, I can congratulate them. If something bad happens, I can reach out and say, hey, are you looking for work? Do you want to talk? Can I help? So LinkedIn is a very good tool for staying in touch with people. It's one of it. You don't have to do it that way, but it's a very good way to find out what's going on in general in the industry with people that you know. Um, so I actually want to talk a little bit about though about follow up. Actually, let me see what my next slide is. Okay, so let's talk about this figure for a second. So this is my network a few years ago on LinkedIn. They used to have this thing where you could map your connections. I don't think the plugin exists anymore. And that's me in the center. And then these are my various networking hubs. So this is probably like women in science. And this could be like Abbott over here. And this could be like Jewish people that I know from synagogue. And this could be like some other, my Addgene network, perhaps, my nonprofit network. It's really kind of cool to do this because like and a lot of people have this sort of a thing like different nodes on their connections. And I currently have about almost 5,000 connections in LinkedIn. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying after many, many years of public speaking, a lot of people connect to me. There is no way I can stay in touch with 5,000 people in a meaningful way. Absolutely no way whatsoever. So I am connected to them. If I need favors, I will reach out to them. If someone tells me I'm looking for a job at this company and you're connected to that person, can you introduce me? I will do it. If you have connected to me, I am assuming you are in my LinkedIn. But those are not the most useful things. The people that you've really met and spent time with, that's your network. But you don't have to stay in touch with them every day. So here's an example of that. When I was in grad school, I mentioned I had a baby. There was only one other student in my entire class in grad school who had children. She actually had 2 children. She was amazing. And nobody understood the having the baby thing. Like nobody got that. Like when I called the lab to tell them I actually had my baby early and I had plates incubating in the incubator. And I called my lab to say, hey, could you take the plates out of the incubator for me? And my colleague said, yep. And he hung up. I called back and I said, Bruce, don't you want to know why I want you to take the plates out of the incubator? And he said, Joanne, I haven't had my coffee yet. What do you want? And I said, Bruce, I had a baby. And he said, okay, great. And he hung up. Like there was no like momentous life occasion. Nobody really got it. Except Michelle Swanson. And I leaned on her. I called her. I got advice from her. She really called me to check up on me. She was super supportive about how to work and have the baby at the same time. And then we both graduated. She went off to an academic position. I went off to a pharma position. We did not stay in touch. She is now the head of ASM, the president of ASM. She's a University of Michigan professor. And I am, at a company, right? And 20 years goes by and I'm going to visit University of Michigan to speak for the AWIS chapter. And I wanted to reach out to the Postdoc Association to see if they would be interested in me speaking for them. So I sent an email to this anonymous postdoc@umich.edu. And I'm thinking no one is going to answer this because I'm a total stranger. And instead, I get an instant reply because who is the faculty in charge of the Postdoc Association? It is Michelle Swanson. We hadn't spoken in 20 years. So people that are real connections are always connections. She was so excited to hear from me. I was so excited to reconnect with her. If you like someone once, you're going to like them later. It doesn't mean that you need daily contact to maintain it. In fact, reaching out to someone for no reason and just like pinging them is a little bit creepy, right? It starts to feel a little weird. So in this case, it was a natural thing. We reconnected. I went and I stayed. I had dinner with her and her family. We had drinks. She hosted me for 3 different talks. It was fantastic to reconnect. And since then, we've interacted about Addgene a little bit and been in touch. But you do not have to have daily contact to maintain a relationship. It's just a matter of the here and the now and being open to having those personal relationship building experiences with the people around you. Okay, so I already talked about how you can't just be asking for things, you have to be doing things. So I think we did this one. How to find out what one can offer to someone during networking. So these things won't always be obvious at the time. Sometimes it's later. You'll be like, oh, I remember that person I met, and here's this other thing that might be useful to them. So that's really a good time to reconnect with them, send them an email and say, hey, you asked about that protocol. I just read this great suggestion for the protocol that would really make it much easier for you. And I thought about it, even though it's been a long time since we talked about it, I thought it might still be useful. Everyone likes those nice little favors, right? It doesn't take a lot to keep people in mind. So always be thinking about how you can help. When I meet people, that's actually the first thing I do is how can I help you, not what you can do for me. And that is paid back a million times. Okay, go to a few more questions here. How do you overcome feeling weird contacting people that you've not had contact with in a while to ask for a favor? I just, people are going to say no. Don't worry about the no's. Most people are happy to hear from someone. I would scale the size of the favor to how much you know the person. If you don't know them well, you can't ask for a giant favor. You can ask for a small favor. I guess I would say if it feels weird, just keep doing it until it stops feeling weird. And don't worry about the no's. Again, people are going to say no, but a lot of people are going to say yes. They like to help. They like to help with career stuff of scientists in training. You have to get used to it. Does a no ruin a connection? No, it doesn't, because next time it might be yes. But if someone never answers your emails, I wouldn't waste time with them. I would move on to other people. Okay, we already talked about feeling weird. I think I already answered this question. How do I ensure boundaries in my personal and professional relationships? I don't. I think personal and professional relationships go together. So I don't think there's boundaries there. Okay. How to network with people at much higher career positions. Thanks, Vitali. I'm glad you asked this question. I would not bother. I don't think it helps if, I love this thing. Someone really famous gives a talk at a conference and then like 100 people mob them to ask questions and have that 1 second of personal contact with that person. Now, look, if you're a fan and you want a selfie, I've done that myself. I've Nobel Prize winners, astronauts, I get it, but they're not going to help you. They don't know you. They're complete strangers. They're not really in your network. And also they may be mean, they may not be nice people. So I don't think what you want to do is build relationships with people at higher positions. I think you want to build relationships with the people around you. And if you want to meet mentors and slightly more senior people, do that informational interview approach. Ask them who they might refer you to, who would be willing to speak with you. And a lot of people, when asked that small favor, will give someone a half an hour. So that's one way that you can build relationships with people that are, different. I don't think higher is a thing. I'm quite advanced in my career, but I learn and have benefit from meeting people at every stage of their careers, early career, mid-career, late career. There's no really higher more important to me. My job at Addgene was not through someone so, high and famous. It was through knowing a lot of different people who were connected to Addgene. So it's more, I don't really go for that meet the famous person thing. You can admire them. You can go for the selfie. I mean, MC Hammer just wished me and my husband a happy anniversary, which he's a famous US music star. I can tell you that story at the end if you're interested. My kids were pretty thrilled by that, but it's not like he's ever going to do me any favors. It was kind of cool on Twitter. So, okay. All right. Let's see what I have next here. Okay, let's talk about social media a little bit, and then I'll come back to the last couple questions. And feel free to add more questions. We're good on time for now. Okay. A note on social media. I think that your generation, I don't know what generation you people are who are on this event, but I think most people know now not to put dumb stuff on Facebook. It'll come back to haunt you. Be careful with what you post. Social media never goes away. Twitter's a little less permanent. Your Twitter feed kind of goes away, but I would still be careful. I'm extremely active on Twitter, so I'm not saying don't be on social media. I'm just saying be careful and be professional all the time. Should be obvious, but I put it in here anyway. Now, I get this question a lot. Do I need to be on LinkedIn? I would say absolutely yes if you are considering moving out of academia, or even if you might someday because you have to. But not necessarily if you are already on a strict academic path, although I actually see a lot more academics on LinkedIn as well, because you never know when you're going to need a job. So I do recommend getting, LinkedIn is going to replace the resume someday. It's already done it for many people. So I recommend getting, at least putting up a good profile. So your LinkedIn should look as good or better than your resume. I'm not sure if you can see this, but I think in the top, I actually have a blog on the Addgene blog called 7 Tips for LinkedIn that goes into more depth and has more pro tips. So I don't have time to do them all here, but I recommend that you do a little research. You don't have to go down the LinkedIn rabbit hole and use it like all the time, every day, but having a profile with a clear professional picture. Don't hide your picture or your profile. LinkedIn is a networking site. If you hide stuff, people can't find you, recruiters can't find you, you're wasting your time. So you need to be open to connections. I wouldn't say connect with strangers that click on you. When strangers try to connect with me, I ask them why they're connecting. Try not to click on your phone to connect. That just sends a random invitation to someone, and that's pretty useless. Who wants to connect with strangers? But if you include a note and you tell me why you're connecting, because you have a question or you saw me speak and you wanted to ask me more questions or whatever it is, that's much better way to invite someone to connect. I do not recommend that you connect with strangers and ask for favors. People ask me about connecting with strangers to do informational interviews. I think it's better to get a referral. I don't think it's as useful, and you won't get as much out of it if it's a complete stranger like that. But do invite people that you've met and talked with at an event, because it's a good way to build the relationship, as I mentioned. You can use LinkedIn to look up details about people you meet in interviews. That's not weird. I've had people interview with me and say, "Hey, I went to Penn also. Hey, great," but don't connect with people that you're in the process of the job. That's a little bit too intrusive. Anyway, see the blog for more details on some of that etiquette. Um, and I strongly encourage the use of LinkedIn. It's been extremely beneficial to me. So where can you practice? With the people around you. Have lunch with a new person every month. Organize the speaker list, because if you organize the speaker list, you get to invite people to come speak and you get to meet them. Every time you attend an event or a talk, say you're going to try and meet one person and then follow up with them. Become active in a group. That's a great way to meet people and make connections. We have to be open these days to online networking. I'm a big in-person networker, but we have what we have here. So there are all kinds of cool new ways to interact in these new conference platforms. I would go to some of those social events that are online and follow up individually, again, with just one person. Can you find that one person that you want to follow up with? Okay. So here are my takeaway messages. Don't wait until you need a job. Start today. If you start when you need a job, it's really awkward for people. So really strongly say, stay in touch with people so it's a long trajectory. It can take 20 years before a connection turns into someone with whom you have an actual working relationship with. If your gut tells you that something feels creepy, don't do it. So I have this one person who I met like 25 years ago, who every 6 months sends me a personal note and an update about his family, and I don't even remember who he is. So it's a little creepy, right? If you call someone like 5 times and they don't answer you, then it's fine. They don't want to talk to you. There are people who don't want to talk to other people or don't have time. You don't know what's going on in their life. Don't judge. But if it feels creepy, just don't do it. I already talked about having your stories ready, being willing to share a little bit and being willing to have a little bit of conversation and being conversational. And also, you don't have to network with people you don't like. Super important. If you don't like someone, then don't network with them. They're not going to be useful to you. A lot of the stuff I've mentioned is in different blogs on the Addgene Science Career Guide. All kinds of blogs about relationship building, science careers. It's fantastic, this guide. It's free ebook. I recommend that you go and download it. And I just thought I would mention, since these are career seminars, these are some of the jobs we have at Addgene. Most of them are not bench science. They're all interesting. The Addgenes are super happy. Here they are. And super happy and super diverse. And so diverse careers can bring a lot of job and career and science satisfaction. So I urge you to look broadly, because nonprofit careers are often ignored. We're not pharma, we're not tech transfer, we're not management consulting. There's a lot of other things that you can do that are really cool in science. Okay, I'm going to answer the rest of the questions, and feel free to add more. This is my last slide. Is it too awkward to directly knock on the door of someone with work you are fond of without any existing announced position? How would you approach this person? I don't really know who that person is. I never think it's awkward or wrong to say to someone, hey, I admire that you can I admire this about you. You're a great public speaker. I really liked the last paper you wrote. You know this protocol that I wish I knew, and ask someone to learn about that thing. I never think that's awkward. People like to teach, scientists like to teach. I wouldn't just go to someone and knock on their door and say, hey, you seem important. Could you be my connection? That's weird. So what you're looking for is genuine reasons to connect with people, not fake reasons, because everybody can tell when it's fake. Everybody, you can tell when it's fake. Don't be fake. It's not helpful. I already talked about how to network if one is shy and a bit of an introvert. I would not focus on events. I would focus on one-on-one sort of informational interview type, and I would join a committee, do something that's comfortable, do some work with people. That's my best advice for that. How can one make their LinkedIn profile attractive for job opportunities? This is a huge topic. I suggest you Google it and get advice on adding keywords. Look at my blog about LinkedIn. It has some very good links to other good blogs about LinkedIn. So you can do this research. It's a skill you can learn. And I would definitely think it's worth, even just to make your profile look really great, look at other people's profiles that look great and model your profile on theirs. That's all I can say about that. Is it more important to make a memorable first impression or the follow-up interactions? Mm, I don't know. I don't know that. I mean, I think being memorable, again, how do you be memorable? Just be human. Just being a little open, interested, you know, and how do you correct a bad first impression? I don't know. That's a hard one. I guess just be friendly. I've made all kinds of mistakes. I once gave a talk at a meeting, and I'm not trying to insult anyone. I made a joke about social science because I'm a bench scientist, and we often make jokes about other kinds of science. I also make jokes about engineers. I'm married to one. But I didn't know that there were a number of social scientists in the audience, and they were very turned off, and it was very embarrassing, and I felt very bad. And I don't even know who they were, but I got this feedback later. And so I told the organizer of the meeting how sorry I was, and I asked her to forward that note to those people. We make mistakes, so I think you just have to your reputation in a community will speak for itself. So if you are helpful to people, I think that's the best thing you can do to correct a bad first impression. Since you mentioned career options at Addgene, are there opportunities for science writers or communicators at Addgene? Sometimes there are. We have a marketing and communications team, and all of our technical service team also does quite a bit of writing and communication as part of their roles. We are not currently hiring for those roles, but you should follow our careers page or follow us on social media because we often post about roles. Our current open role, we didn't do a lot of hiring this year because the coronavirus. We really had to actually keep our numbers. We had to reduce our numbers slightly for a variety of business reasons, but because we were closed for some weeks and then much reduced distribution. So our revenue is down, which means we didn't have the funds to support everybody. But we are hiring someone to head up our DNA core facility here at Addgene. And that's a PhD level position that's open right now. So I don't think we have any other current PhD positions, but we do hire pretty often, just sort of one position at a time. We're not a very big company. We're only about 100 people. So thank you for asking. Okay, any other questions or chat? Oh, wow, people are from all over. So cool. I'm looking in the chat. I haven't been looking in the chat. So if you put questions in the chat, please switch them to Q&A. Any other questions? Okay, I think we're done. I hope that was helpful.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for
Thank
the
you.
amazing talk and for the workshop. We really liked how you explained everything, and all the questions were really well answered. And yeah, it was great having you on the panel. Um, if we don't have any further questions, I would close the webinar. Thank you, Joanne, for again, yeah, for the amazing talk and the workshop and the speed dating again. So yeah,
Sure. Yep, great. Reach out to me if you have other questions, online. I'm easy to find. Thanks, everybody. Have a great conference.
thank you. Bye, everyone.